a wonderful morning to worship the Lord. This is the day, this is the day.
Good morning, everyone. Here we go. Inspiration for today. And wow, do we have an exciting chapter for you today as we go through our study of the book of Revelation. And I hope you've read chapter 11. And let me remind you, we're in a process for a few chapters here where I encourage you to read the next chapter, which will be 12 for tomorrow, because we're not reading every verse right now since we're not on the earth right now. We talked about the rapture and we're out of here, but there's some amazing, I love this chapter. Exciting, as I said. Chapter 11. Now we are between the 6th and 7th trumpet. So this is kind of a pause there, but John writes about something that's going to happen in that last 3.5 years before Jesus comes back to earth in power. So here's what he says, chapter 11, verse 1. I was given a reed like a measuring rod and was told, go and measure the temple of God and the altar and count the worshipers there, but exclude the outer court. Don't measure it because it's been given to the Gentiles. They will trample on the holy city for 42 months. And I will give power to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. Now, some things we have to point out there. First of all, that there will be a temple built and exist during the tribulation. And it says in the holy city, that means it's in Jerusalem. Now, that temple doesn't exist right now. I know over time, people have suggested that if we start to see a temple being built in Jerusalem, we know that it's getting closer to the time that is talked about right here and now. So it's a literal place because we know he asked John to go measure it. Go measure it. Now, this is the temple that's here. There's also the real temple is in heaven, as we'll actually see at the end of this chapter. And by the way, 42 months is 1,260 days. So he's talking about the last 3.5 years of the tribulation, which is called the Great Tribulation. Now, he says he's going to have 2 witnesses. 2 witnesses. And he says they're men, and they're going to go out with great, great power. And this is a time that God is going to allow the gospel to be preached. Kind of the last chance of the last chances. And we saw that many people haven't been turning to the Lord, even in the midst of huge calamities, unexplainable by any other means other than that it's all of God. Let's drop down to verse 7. These men of power saying amazing things, and I'm sure some people are coming to know Christ during that time. Now, when they have finished their testimony, in other words, when they're finished telling about Christ, then, look what happens to them. The beast that comes up from the abyss will attack them and overpower and kill them. You know who that somebody is, the beast? It's the Antichrist, the Antichrist. And he's talked about throughout Revelation. And this is one time where God allows him and he kills these 2 witnesses. Their bodies will lie, verse 8, in the street of the great city. That is, they're going to be on view in Jerusalem, which is figuratively called Sodom and Egypt, where also their Lord was crucified. So that's how we know that it is Jerusalem that he is talking about. For 3.5 days, men from every tribe, people, language, and nation will gaze on their bodies and refuse them burial. And the inhabitants of the earth will gloat over them and will celebrate by sending each other gifts, because these 2 prophets had tormented those who live on earth. What way are they tormenting them? Isn't that something? They're tormenting them by telling the truth, that the only way to be saved is through faith in Jesus. And they viewed that as tormenting. But isn't that something, for all the years that that the Bible has existed, and even when it was first written, this book was first written in the late first century, that would have been very hard to understand, wouldn't it? That people from all over the world will gaze on their dead bodies and refuse them burial. That seemed impossible. But now that we have television and the internet, right? It doesn't seem like a big deal at all to us. And I'm sure that for literally 19 centuries, people used this paragraph to prove that the Bible could not be true. That'd be impossible, they'd say. For people to see these bodies from all over the world? Impossible. Science disproves that. They might even say, scientists, that's impossible. We now know it's not only possible, it's like instantaneous. It'll happen, and we'll see it, and everyone will be rejoicing. See, those people that follow God, God didn't they talk about God and so on, but he let, if there was a God, how could they be dead? And then verse 11, but after 3.5 days, a breath of life from God entered them, and they stood on their feet. And guess what? Terror struck those who saw them. And that'll be seen all over the world also, evidently. And they heard a loud voice from heaven saying, come up here. And they went up to heaven in a cloud, while their enemies looked on. Can you imagine that as a live TV event? Oh my goodness. It's just phenomenal that this could be written so long ago, and now, guess what? Be true. And may that be a lesson for us if we ever see things in the Bible that we think can't be true. If God says them, they're true. And if that wasn't enough to see it, verse 13, at that very hour there was a severe earthquake, and 1/10 of the city collapsed. 7,000 people were killed in the earthquake, and the survivors were terrified. But finally, at least those in Jerusalem, what? Do you see it? Gave glory to the God of heaven. Finally, somebody repents and turns to God. That's encouraging. That's encouraging. And that was the second woe, and the third is coming. But now we actually, after that, just awesome story, not story, it's a statement of fact. This is happening. And it's happening at the end of time, right before Jesus comes back. And if that weren't clear, well, then the seventh angel sounded his trumpet. We finally would get to the seventh trumpet, and there were loud voices in heaven. And those voices said, the kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and his Christ, and he will reign forever and ever. Obviously, this is when all this happens, right at the end, right before Jesus returns to earth. And we'll read about that in coming chapters. And that's where we're going to start going back to verse by verse, because we come back with him to reign on earth. The 24 elders who were seated on their thrones fell on their faces, and they worshiped God. And you should read what they say in worship. And verse 19, then God's temple in heaven was opened, and within his temple was seen the Ark of the Covenant. Wow. The temple that's we're going to read about coming down to earth is already built. And John was able to not only see that, but he had a look inside. And what did he see? The Ark of the Covenant. Oh man, what an exciting chapter 11 is, isn't it? Oh. But there's more to come. So I hope you tune back in tomorrow. Read chapter 12 if you have time at all today, and then we'll discuss it tomorrow morning. God bless. Have a great day in the Lord.
Beautiful day. It's wonderful. This is the day that the Lord